Hey, it's Dr. Nina, and welcome to You, Your Body, and Your Health. I think this is pretty much the eighth show, so we're moving right along. Much appreciation to everyone who is tuned in, whether you tune in live or tune in later. I really do appreciate you being here and spending your afternoon with me on a Friday. So, without further ado, let's just start by saying, where are you from? Tell me where you're tuning in from. I would love to hear that and kind of know who I'm working with here. It is the last Friday of October, just in case you didn't know that. And I'd like to say that in the last Friday of October, eating season generally begins. So eating season is starting as of Monday. Now, over the last few weeks, I focused on the three macronutrients. So we were really talking about eating a lot. I talked about fat, we talked about carbohydrates, and we talked about protein. I know that there was a lot of information, especially if you tune into the other shows. So if you tune into every single show, there was a lot of information given, but I did get some great questions that I think could apply to everyone. So I wanted to take some time in this episode to answer those questions instead of introducing a new topic. Let's kind of take a breath of fresh air and reflect as we approach this eating season on how we should be eating fats, carbohydrates, and protein. So this week, as I said in the promo, is all about your questions. And I want to reiterate, as always, that this show is focused on health span. And health span is the number of years within your lifespan that you are generally healthy. And healthy eating is a critical part, an inevitable part of this equation if you're trying to increase the number of years on this earth that you're healthy. Now, we will not be having a successful aging segment this week because I want to focus on your questions. So I want to give you all the time you need to ask those questions. But know that everything we generally talk about when it comes to food, it pretty much applies to successful aging anyway. We are all aging from the time we're born, but specifically after about the age of 29. So everything that pertains to adequate intake of fat, carbohydrates, and proteins throughout the lifespan is pretty much focused on aging successfully. So I realize that we are probably going to have a lot of questions here. And what I want to do as you think about it, and maybe to get your question juices flowing, I'm going to start off with some questions that I got from people already. And these were questions that I thought applied to everyone. So they were broad enough. There were broad enough questions to go ahead and start the show. So the first one, this is a great question on one of my re-airs. Can I drink alcohol and still lose weight? Is anybody wondering about that? Because especially with what's been happening for the last year with COVID, we definitely probably had a drink or two extra, maybe every night that we didn't normally have. So that is a great question, and the beautiful answer is yes. Yes, you can have alcohol and still lose weight. But if you intend on drinking when you're trying to lose weight, I generally recommend focusing on some key beverages. If you're a beer drinker, I recommend focusing on light beers. If you like wines, I definitely recommend going towards the dry and semi-dry wines because they're lower in sugar, naturally lower in sugar. And as we talked about in the carbohydrates episode, sugar can really take your whole weight loss effort out of whack. And I also recommend drinking low calorie mixed drinks if you're going to drink. Now, occasional alcohol consumption, which may make a lot of people happy, it does have proven health benefits. And that's not just the red wine that we talk about. Ethanol itself, which is what alcohol is comprised of, does have some health benefits. The key is, especially when it comes to unwanted weight gain, and especially when it comes to, potential addiction, which is, that trumps unwanted weight gain. That's a lot more of an issue. You definitely want to err on the side of 1 to 2 drinks a night. Anything above that, or 1 to 2 drinks a day, whenever you drink, anything above that, especially when it's done within a limited amount of time, like we do sort of when we go to bars and that sort of thing, that goes into a binge drinking kind of category. And that can do some real damage, not only when it comes to your weight, but also when it comes to your body. So hopefully I answered that question. Let me look in the queue and see if we have some more questions. Hello, people. Where are you tuning in from? I usually have way more than this by now. Where are you tuning in from? Make sure you tell me and put your question in there if you have one. Um, let me see. I have a question here. We're talking about, okay, that wasn't a specific question from Darlene. I think, um, I'm not sure how to properly banish. Okay, this is a question, Darlene. Sorry about that. So Darlene says that she's not sure how to properly manage her meals. She has diabetes and she thinks she's doing good with the sugar, but doing good, but the sugar isn't dropping. Now, this is a very excellent question, and I'm going to answer it for a couple of reasons. One, we're going into a diabetes conversation next week, and November is national. It's a diabetes awareness month, so we do want to get into that conversation since it's such a prevalent condition. Now, when it comes to managing the meals, there's this old, I don't want to call it dated, but there's some sort of dated advice. It still works, so I don't want to say dated in the sense of it being a bad thing, but the 6 meal a day rule when it comes to diabetes. I will tell you, having worked with people on all different sides of the spectrum when it comes to working hours, everyone can't do 6 meals a day. So generally when it comes to eating, especially when you have diabetes, I always recommend focusing on the nutrients and ingredients, the ingredients in particular that you eat. So what do I mean by this? Well, rather than focusing on calories or focusing on sugars per se, if you remember from the last episode, if you didn't see it then, definitely look at the last episode. I put a pyramid up. I recommend focusing on food groups and ingredients. So, for example, when you have, if you have diabetes and you know that there are certain foods that are going to carry higher sugar counts, and that's fruit included, I recommend focusing your attention on getting a minimal serving amount of those foods. Again, we're not talking about meals. We're talking about what you eat in a day. So, if you set out in a day to eat X amount of servings of vegetables, that could be what I recommend for diabetes is generally 6+ servings. Focus on that. Because what happens is when we get into the meal prep and the meal planning, as soon as something comes in and kind of puts a dent in that plan, you fall off the bandwagon. Travel is a perfect example of that. But if you can focus on the foods that you eat, meaning saying, I want to get X amount of proteins a day, I want to get X amount of servings of vegetables a day, I want to put my fruits and my sweets at a minimum, I recommend doing that versus really focusing on the meals themselves. I also recommend, and I'm going to do a show about that in the future, intermittent fasting. And I don't mean going to the extreme. We talk about intermittent fasting in terms of just 8-hour windows and that sort of thing. But you can benefit, Darlene, I really want to emphasize that, from just moving your meals to a window of as little as 12 hours. So basically 12 hours of eating, 12 hours of not eating, and pushing it back in the day. So if you normally have breakfast at like 7 or 8 o'clock, push it back to 10 and 11. Intermittent fasting, or just kind of pushing that window back, is known to really have positive and beneficial effects on blood sugar levels. So I hope I answered that question. But definitely that 12-hour window is a good place to start, especially if you think you're doing good, but that sugar isn't moving. That was a winded answer, but I thought it deserved that particular answer. So, and yes, she started intermittent fasting there. That is good to know. So, all right, let me move on to another question because I haven't got too many questions. This was another one. I actually love this question. I got this question last week when we were talking about the protein. Is protein powder a good source of protein? This is an excellent question because even when I kind of polled my audience and I said, what's the best sources of, or what's your favorite sources of protein? A lot of people said protein powders. Now, I will tell you this: when consumed in a timely manner, that's like when consumed, I'd say timely manner, really, if you're focusing on workouts and muscle building and that sort of thing. So when you consume them, and you consume them with other whole foods and in a timely manner as you would consume other foods, supplements containing whey, casein, soy, and egg white protein have all been shown to really do wonders for your muscle preservation, so muscle mass preservation, and also improve physical function if you're an athlete. Now, they have different proteins on the market. This is where it gets kind of funny. All protein powders are not created equal. And so generally when you do incorporate protein powders into your diet, I want you to look at this as a rule of thumb. First, You want to make sure it has at least 15 grams of high quality protein in it. So if it's less than 15 grams of protein in your protein powder scoop or serving, whatever serving is, it's generally not really a high protein powder. Another thing to pay attention to in reference to sugar is to make sure that it's less than 5% sugar. Because if you have a bunch of sugar in even a protein powder that has above 15 grams, you're looking at something that's really not a true high protein powder. Another thing when it comes to protein powders that I recommend is making sure you combine them with wholesome foods. I see a lot of people will take a protein powder drink and put a lot of fruit in it. Yeah, fruit is good for us, but you don't want to drink a sugar bomb. So when you decide to put more ingredients in your protein powders for more nutrition, I really highly encourage you to follow a ratio of adding more vegetables than fruit. So if you normally put a serving of fruit in there, put 2 servings of vegetables and treat it that way. I also recommend putting a good quality fat source like a nut butter or some seeds or seed butter in that protein powder as well, if you're going to add things to it. So hopefully I answered the question to the person that answered that question. And if you didn't ask that question, hopefully you got some benefit from that answer. I am looking at a question that I'm going to answer later because it's pretty specific, Latanya. So I did get your questions. I will get to that question later. What I'm trying to do in this particular segment, I'll answer your question offline. I'm trying to focus on questions that are more broad, that, have more broad kind of appeal. I don't want to say appeal, but things that a lot of people experience. So when we're getting into the really specific questions, I really don't want to use all the time answering those, but that is a good question that you asked, and I want to get to it. So stay tuned. I will answer your question offline for sure. All right. So let me move on to another question. This is a big one that I kind of answered. Can I eat carbs and still lose weight? If you have that question, raise your hand. Go ahead, raise your hand. Give me a fist bump. Say, answer that question, Nina, because that's a common question. Because as we talked about in my carb show, carbs are the quintessential boogeyman, and these things are just hated by everyone, whether you're counting calories, counting carbs, or doing anything. Karen, I am going to get to that answer because that question is actually in my queue because cholesterol is such a common issue. I'm going to get to that. You know what? Let me skip it. I'll get back to the can I eat carbs and lose weight. You all keep fist bumping on me because I'm going to answer that question. But Karen just asked the question that's actually in my queue. So this question in particular was, I have high cholesterol. Should I eat eggs? I got to address this one. Believe it or not, look at me, folks, because this is a big one. And I got the question a lot when people were talking about shrimp and beef and that sort of thing and liking it. Despite common belief, you listening? Research has continued to show for decades, that dietary cholesterol, that is cholesterol in the foods we eat, has little to no effect on cholesterol in the blood. None, nada, zilch, none. And this has actually been substantiated by science, and even in the 2015 to the 2020 version of the dietary guidelines for Americans. If you notice, they don't really say it a lot anymore. You'll get some people with dated information. I hate to say, some clinicians will still give that advice. People who just haven't got the memo. Dietary cholesterol does not have the effect that it has long had. So, with that being said, you can eat your eggs, and actually 4 to 5, as much as 4 to 5 eggs a day is effective. The truth is, many of the world's healthiest foods that are commonly shunned due to high cholesterol amounts, they actually promote heart health, not hinder it. And these foods include those eggs, those dairy foods, grass-fed meats, fish, shellfish. So these are foods, if you want to eat them, you definitely don't have to avoid them. Now, I'll give you some advice here when it comes to really, really focusing on cholesterol levels. The key is to focus on the overall nutritional quality of your diet. So instead of talking about eliminating eggs or eliminating beef and really talking about, and this doesn't just apply to high cholesterol people. This applies to healthy eating in general. So don't think this question is only for high cholesterol. It could apply to diabetes, it could apply to prevention or just not getting these conditions. You focusing on the overall quality of the food you eat. If you watch the last episodes, that is having diets that are very high in plant-based foods. You do not have to be vegan or vegetarian, but focusing on getting those plant-based foods in your diet, most of your diet, I'd say 80% of your diet, and trying to eat like that most of the time, that is your key. It's really easy to kind of conflate and pinpoint one particular food and say, this did it, that did it. But it's a lot harder to sit and look at yourself and say, what am I eating? Like for real, what am I eating and what does my diet look like? I know you all can relate to that. Give me a fist bump if you know in your heart, there's probably something that I'm not doing that she's talking about. It's okay. We are human. This happens. Cholesterol itself has a very high diet or hereditary component. So there's some genetics there. And that's not, it just happens. So even if you do every single thing right, if you have a higher propensity to develop high cholesterol, I am saying it, people, that's what meds are for. Now, someone said that and I saw it. Oh, I see that. Phyllis said it. Sometimes, even if everything is correct, if there's a diet or hereditary component or a genetic component to your high cholesterol, there is a chance that you may have to take a med for added support, and it's okay. That doesn't mean that you eat like trash. That means that you have a medication that you have to take to help manage your high cholesterol, and that is a part of increasing health span. That is a part of doing it. Sometimes there are things that are not under our control. And yeah, that part of life sucks, but it is what it is. That doesn't mean, go crazy with the diet because you have to take a med. You can still put these things into practice. I hope that helps you. I hope that answers your question. I'm looking at some fist bumps. I think I did answer that question. Think of more questions because we do have more time. I'm going to go ahead and jump back in. And again, there's no successful aging segment, so we got about 13 minutes left for a good amount of questions. So let me jump into that carbs conversation because people are always asking me that, do I have to not eat carbs at all to lose weight? Absolutely not. Let me give you a little trick. It's a little dirty trick. It works though. The key to eating carbs is portion control. Let me give you a good example. You've probably not heard this before, but who's had a Subway sandwich? Raise your hand. I'm going to give you an example of this. Who's had a Subway sandwich? Maybe in the last 6 months. Well, I haven't. Let me put my hand down. I haven't had a Subway sandwich in a year, but I know it's very, very common. And I'm not putting Subway on blast, really any sandwich shop. When it comes to carbohydrate intake, most of us eat too much of it. It is not that carbohydrates themselves are bad. It's that we go crazy and haphazardly eat them. If I tell you that ideally you should have 3 to 5 servings of carbohydrates a day, would you know what a serving was? Raise your hand or say nope. Like Darlene said, nope. Nope. Oh, Darlene hasn't had any Subway. That's what you're saying, but raise your hand. Any sandwich, anything. But do you know what a serving of a carb is? I use Subway for an example. That 6-inch sub, the 6-inch one, the one that we're getting when we're trying to eat less, that is 4 servings of carbohydrates. 4 in a 6-inch Subway sandwich with regular bread. Say, uh-oh, if you are shocked. Were you today years old when you learned that there were 4 servings of carbs in a 6-inch Subway sandwich? Now, if you're trying to lose weight, and I tell you ideally 3 to 5 servings of carbohydrates is like that's your target, and you just got 4 servings in a Subway sandwich, the 6-inch, do you think that carbs are the problem? Or do you think that could have been that 4 servings of it you had, along with your oatmeal, along with your beans, along with your rice, and everything else. The average American is eating about 10 servings of carbs every day. And ideally, we want to be between 3 and 5 servings. If you visit thatsaladlady.com, this is the kind of stuff I talk about on there, because a lot of this confusion about fats, carbohydrates, proteins, and every other thing is really a function of confusion about portions, what they mean, portion mismanagement. Now, that's not to say that you can't have your Subway sandwich. Did you just think I said you can't have it? I didn't say that. That's to say, if you are eating a 6-inch Subway sandwich, and God forbid eating a 12-inch, know that that is not the problem of carbs. That is your problem. And the same thing goes with people who eliminate gluten from their diet, thinking that they're gluten sensitive when they're really not. A lot of times it's just that we eat too much of everything all the time. Can I get an amen to that? Give me an amen if you just learned something new, please. Because I'm so glad someone asked that question, because I wanted to get that out so bad. Carbs themselves are not the problem. The key is portion control. I'll throw some more carbs out. A half a serving of beans. I had a client that really learned a lot when I told her this. A half a cup of beans is a serving. A half a cup of corn is a serving. Half a corn on a cob is a serving. These are serving size issues that are leading to these problems. I guarantee you. Now, I do recommend some things for kidney health. I'm going to answer that because I just answered someone else answer someone else's question when it comes to that. I'm going to get back to you on that question, Adolph. I promise. I hope I pronounce your name right. I'm going to get back to you on that question because I do have an answer for you, but I probably can't answer within this time frame. But yes, I will answer that question for you. Now, oh gosh, she asked a slice of pizza. Girl, how many carbs in a slice of pizza? Girl, it just depends on what's on that pizza. You don't want that answer now. I don't want to hurt you yet. But it just depends on what's on your pizza. I'm not answering that question yet. A lot. Now, I'm going to move on to another question. This is the one that I don't get this question often, but there's always someone who wants to know it. What about gaining weight? Everyone doesn't want to lose weight, believe it or not. There is a set of people in this world who actually want to lose or gain weight. So how do you do that in a healthy way? That is a great question that people have been asking me that question since this show started. Like, what if I want to gain weight? The thing I recommend now, I'm about to flip what I just said. This is actually the flip of the first answer. Do not get confused, especially if you're not trying to gain weight. You want to up your intake of carbs. I know I just said you can eat carbs and lose weight. Now I'm saying up your carb intake to gain it. But I said this for a reason. I said up your intake of carbs. I did not say up your intake of refined carbs. It's a difference. So generally, when someone comes to me and says they're trying to gain weight, I generally recommend 3 simple things in the diet. Add a potato, and I mean a sweet potato, or it could be a white potato. If you are prone to conditions that, no, I don't even want to say that. You could do a white potato. I'm not going to, that's a whole nother step, because white potatoes do have a sort of starch in them that's beneficial. Just don't eat 3 and 4 of them. So you can up your intake of a potato. You can add a serving of beans a day, actually a serving to 2 of beans a day. And you can do something as simple as eat a handful of nuts, an extra handful of nuts. You don't have to go load up on pizza and a bunch of I don't want to say pizza is a low quality carb, because it's all about the way you make it. You don't want to load up on low quality carbs when you're trying to lose weight. You want to really up your intake of the higher quality carbs. Again, your beans, your nuts, your seeds, your peas, and your whole grain breads, even your whole grains in general, your quinoas, your amaranths. You don't, just because you're trying to gain weight doesn't mean you eat trash, because what you don't want to do is introduce yourself to a whole nother set of health problems in your effort to gain weight. I hope I answered that question. Anyone else have a question that I can throw in there now? Phyllis, you don't have to eat grass, girl. Don't say that. You don't have to eat grass. I'm telling you. Look, I need you all, if you haven't done so right now, put thatsaladlady.com because I'm sensing some discourage here. I don't want that. Click on thatsaladlady.com and bookmark it, and you can see that you don't have to just eat grass, and you can see that salad lady is not about just eating salads. It's about whole food nutrition for whole life wellness, because I like to eat. I like grassy foods. I do. I'm guilty, but I like to eat personally too. And I'm so glad you think the site is the bomb. Thank you very, very much. And subscribe as well, because I got a newsletter coming in there where I give you all kind of good information there as well. Can you control where you lose weight from? Excellent question. Excellent question. Excellent. Beautiful. Thank you for asking that. Absolutely not. This is a very common misconception. You cannot control where you lose weight. We have this issue again called ding, ding, ding genetics, that, if we're just built a certain way, we're just built a certain way. And then if we have a tendency to gain weight in certain areas, we just do. Now, it's not that you're not gonna lose weight in those areas. It's that there's generally more in that area. For example, I'm in extreme pear shape. I get heavy at the bottom, and my bottom will just spread and spread and spread, and nothing will happen to the top. I know some of you all got that thing. Some people have the reverse, have the extreme apple shape. You can't say, hey, go from the top, don't go from the bottom. I want to hold on to that. But you can attempt to lose the weight. It will eventually go. And another trick, as you lose the weight in the areas that, lose your weight overall, you want to focus on building muscle in the areas that you want to preserve. Do you understand what I just said? So basically, if you are trying to lose weight in your upper body, for example, one of the tricks I generally used to use a lot when I trained clients was I would train them to build up the lower body. And while they have a good diet, while they have good exercise habits, but I would specifically train them with strength training exercises to really build up that lower body, because one, and they still train the upper body, they just do it a little different. Because one, not only does it help you look less awkward, it helps you look more even, but it also increases your metabolic rate. Every weight training session you engage in increases your metabolic rate for up to 12 hours, depending on how intense it is. So that was a great question. Very good question. I'm so glad you asked it, because it's very, very common. That's a good question, Erilyn. Okay, I'm going to take this question. This is probably going to be the last question, because the last question was pretty. Yeah, I'll get the last question in. I think I answered all the questions. Shoot, that's good, because I answered that cholesterol question. I had 5 already. So I'll close with this question from Erilyn, because it's probably going to be a little winded. So she says, my cholesterol level is 231. My doctor said cut back on my animal intake. Is a meatless diet the way to go? I'm sorry, I'm not going to agree with that. I'm not going to agree with that, because as I said before, you do not have to eliminate meat from your diet in order to control your cholesterol. As I said earlier in the show, the cholesterol in meat, and I specifically said it, contributes very little, if any, to your total cholesterol intake. Now, saturated fat is still viewed as a boogeyman as well, but when it comes to saturated fats and when it comes to the cholesterol housed in the foods we eat, it is all about the quality of the animal-based food that you're eating and the overall quality of your diet. Please listen to me when I say that. If you do not want to go meatless, you do not have to. And this is why I'm saying it, because a lot of people jump on that meatless bandwagon, and I said that in another show, and start haphazardly consuming carbs. And I'll give you a piece of advice, because we got a lot of questions on cholesterol at this point. When it comes to reducing cholesterol, focus on whole food nutrition, eating more plant forward diet is good, but not calling yourself vegan or meatless or eating meatless and going and buying all these things in a box, that's not going to cut it. Focus on whole food nutrition for whole life wellness. I encourage you to go back and look at my talks on cholesterol, protein, and fat if you didn't, because I really addressed that issue of going meatless in order to control your cholesterol and just eat healthy in general. So I am just like that. 30 minutes went by. So I'm going to stop here, but know that if I did not get to your question during this show, I still have it in the queue and I'm going to get to your answer today, and you will get your answer today. Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for tuning in to You, Your Body, and Your Health with me, Dr. Nina. And as always, you can find me on all the social media channels with That Salad Lady. With Instagram, I'm on that.salad.lady. So that one is a little different, but also visit thatsaladlady.com. Subscribe in order to get plenty of health tips and information, valuable stuff, and recipes delivered. I have exclusive recipes for subscribers delivered straight to your inbox. Our first newsletter just went out today, so make sure you do that. And again, stay in touch with me on social media. I will see you next week for the first Friday of Diabetes Awareness Month, and we will talk about the role of physical activity in the diabetes equation. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.